Good morning, Rachel. Just so you know, we are live right now.
Good morning, Chip.
Morning, Rachel. Hope you're good.
I'm doing well. I hope you are too.
Yeah, try my best. Yeah.
Morning, Clarence.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning, Clarence.
How are you doing, Chip?
Good. Hope you're well.
Doing well.
Good.
Miss Hall, how are you doing?
I am well. Glad to be with you. Thank you so much for the invitation to speak today.
We're happy that you've accepted the invitation. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. Now, how do you pronounce your first name?
It's Ojeda, so it's it's not Ojeda, which a lot of people look at it and think it's Spanish, but it's a hard J. My parents, they were doing something creative. I don't know.
So you said Ojeda?
Yes, sir.
All right. I like to try to get people's names pronounced correctly.
That means a lot. Thank you. My mother would appreciate that.
Well, welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
Dr. Smith, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing well today. How are you in this, whatever this morning is? Yeah, doing very well. Thanks.
Looks like a little bit of a combination of snow and sleet here in the Bowie area, mostly on the grass.
Yeah, it didn't interrupt our operations this morning. What little student transportation we're doing, but all the other movement across the system. So, and I'm in my office, and I drove around for a while. It's okay. It's just strange and messy. It's really messy.
So Jack, this is Joan Ailey McCarthy. I run an independent school in Anne Arundel County. It's really strange because I usually rely on public schools to give me an indicator as to what they're doing for delays.
Yes.
And so I was checking all the public school districts and I went, maybe not. So there was nothing here. So we just kept on. But then I was getting texts from my teachers. What? No delay? No delay? Great.
We're in a whole new world here, aren't we? It's very, very different. But actually, I know who you are. We've met.
Yes, we have.
You assessed our two youngest boys who were adopted from Bulgaria when they were 5 and 7. And gave us some really good feedback that we use both for private services and for public education. And I will tell you now, you saw them at 5 and 7. They are 31 and 33, both doing really well in life. And so thank you for being part of that all those years ago.
Thank you so much for telling me that. I always love to hear it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yep, they got, of course, language services and special education services, but you were part of the very beginning of that.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. It was helpful. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. We are live. We will be starting in about 3 minutes or so. Just give you a heads up. To our guests, welcome. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to meet with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to have you here. At this time, we'd like to call the meeting to order. If you're not speaking, please mute your phones. I'd like to call upon Dr. Simpson to call the roll.
Good morning, everyone. Mr. Bartley,
Present.
Ms. Bates,
Present.
Mr. DeShiel,
Good morning. Present.
good morning. Dr. Getty,
Present.
Dr. Green,
Good morning. Present.
good morning. Ms. Halley,
Present, thank you.
Dr. Lee,
Present.
Ms. McCusker,
Present.
Dr. Millie McCarthy,
Present.
Ms. Morrow,
Present.
General Sumter,
Present.
Dr. Wilcox,
Present. Good morning.
good morning. Mr. Wu,
Present. Good morning.
good morning. Mr. Crawford,
Present.
Dr. Salmon,
Good morning. Present.
good morning. The roll call is complete.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
You have a quorum. All members are present. All 14.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Again, I want to welcome the board, staff, and the public to our board meeting today, which will be conducted virtually. The public will have access to our meeting via the town hall streams and the YouTube streaming on the state board's webpage. The agenda and the materials are posted there. The archived video will also be posted there. During the meeting, the board members and speakers and presenters will be able to speak. Board members and speakers are asked to identify themselves when they're making their presentation. Ask board members to identify themselves when they're speaking. Dr. Salmon will respond to each question, or she will ask us, the appropriate staff member, to do so. Voting will be conducted by voice or roll call. And then Mr. Schoen will then ratify the vote. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and we're for our guests. We really appreciate you taking time out. We look forward to your comments. I will call each speaker in the order in which you registered. You will be given 3 minutes to speak. Dr. Simpson will monitor the time. When the time expires, we ask that we'll permit you to complete a sentence, but we ask you to make no further remarks. At the end of your presentation, you will be released immediately from the meeting call room by our call room manager. Direct your comments to the entire board, not to an individual. Board members will not respond to your comments, but we'll take those comments under advisement. If you have a written statement, please, or any materials, please submit those to Dr. Simpson, and she will make sure that each of the board members will get a copy. Okay, so getting ready now to get started. I want to welcome Mr. Chris Lloyd. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, President Crawford, and thank you. On behalf of the Professional Standards Board and in our continued commitment to consistent and clear communication, I come before you this morning. We want to first thank President Crawford and Vice President Halley for reaching out and continuing the conversation we started late last year. We believe such communication is essential in these times. It helps to build relationships and forge a better understanding of the interests expressed by both boards, for the ultimate benefit, obviously, of our young scholars here in the state of Maryland. We appreciate you reviewing and reflecting upon the areas we transmitted to you as they relate to educator licensure and programs for educator preparation. We also appreciate your willingness to consider these ideas at today's meeting for potential incorporation into proposed language. We recognize that there will be areas of agreement, disagreement, and topics that need further discussion, and we intend to continue to dialogue with you in this process and also respect the urgency of this work. We also recognize that some of the proposals would require some additional work, of which we rely, all of us, upon the capable minds and hands of the dedicated staff here at MSDE. All of us as board members have lives and careers outside of these boards and devote significant time and energy to the work to answer the call of public service. So some language, as always, will need to be revised to meet the needs of these bodies, and we will all engage with honorable intent in this work. Following your action today, I wanted to let you know that we will place these items on our agenda for our meeting next week, where we will review the packet from today, your discussion today, and the action so that we can robustly continue to engage with you. And during this time, I will continue to communicate with you, President Crawford, so that we can maintain open lines of communication. Finally, I want to take a moment of personal privilege and extend our best wishes for good health to each of you in this time, but especially to you, President Crawford. May your courage be an example to others, and may you be blessed with healing. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you today. And as always, I'm available for any questions that you or the board might have about PISTEP's work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We now next have Ms. Ojide Hall. Did I get it right?
Almost. All good. Good morning, board members. My name is Ojeda Hall. I serve as the executive director here in Maryland for the One Love Foundation. We're an organization dedicated to the prevention of teen dating violence, something that 1 in 3 teens in Maryland will experience this year. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today in support of the recommendation to increase the graduation requirement to a full credit of health. We can and we must get this done in order to change these devastating statistics. One Love, you may know, began out of a relationship violence tragedy, the death of Baltimore native Yardley Love in 2010. Her death was 100% preventable if she or anyone around her had understood the signs of an unhealthy and increasingly dangerous relationship. Realizing this truth, her family started One Love to create dynamic educational tools and workshops that youth-facing organizations, including schools, could use to ensure their young people have a common language for understanding relationship health and knowing what to do with an unhealthy relationship before it becomes abuse. One Love's content is completely free because Yardley's mom wanted it to be completely free so that everyone could have access. We have educated 156,000 young people in Maryland and built active partnerships with over 140 schools and community-based organizations like the Maryland Center for School Safety, Free State Justice, the Baltimore Ravens, the Maryland Office of Crime Control and Prevention. But given the biggest barrier to participation is finding available classroom time, we can do so much more if we increase the graduation requirement to a full credit from the current half credit required now. Maryland educators understand the importance of this health education, which has only increased during the COVID pandemic with domestic violence rates on the rise. Students are isolated, depressed, increasingly using social media for friendships and for dating. One educator said students need social emotional learning and mental health supports, that every subject needs to have a trauma-informed lens. And we hear over and over that our students, especially young boys, simply want a language of what a healthy relationship looks like. But at a time where our students need health education the most, educators are finding it nearly impossible to find time to provide it. We asked health educators, what do you need in this pandemic? And they overwhelmingly said more time and better ways to teach hard topics in health education and make them fun. One educator stated that the class period time is all over the place, making it challenging to get health lessons in, including the One Love lessons. The true measure of what a school system values and prioritizes is in how much money is allocated to its success and how much time is dedicated to its implementation. We are so excited. The state has created an extensive set of health standards, a health education framework, diverse health education topics. This is good. However, in order to teach this content, our educators should be allotted more time for this education and not at the expense of another lesson plan. If we say the well-being of our students is top priority, we must prove it by carving out time in the classroom on these topics for them to learn. Our students' mental and emotional health right now depends on it. Finally, an expanded health education requirement will greatly expand educators' ability to support our state's health our state's youth in relationship health education. And this can only help change the statistics around teen dating violence. Think about it. We cannot have healthy school communities without healthy relationships. Healthy relationship education is a root cause opportunity. Relationship health is a root cause. Thank you so much. Look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. This time we'd like to have Ms. Rachel Koziel. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Rachel Kozel. Thank you, Dr. Salmon and members of the board for allowing my comments this morning. I have lived in Harford County my entire life. I have a first grader, 6 years old, and a preschooler, 4 years old. My youngest attends preschool, wearing a mask, and has not had any COVID incidents. My 6-year-old sees her younger sister going to school. This is devastating for her. She speaks of having to stare at her computer all day. The morning after Christmas break, she was physically ill from the thought, vomiting, gagging, and dry heaving in the bathroom before school. She doesn't understand why she is feeling the way she is. Her feelings aren't wrong. This does not work. She also doesn't feel inspired with school on a computer, but says she is trying hard and doing extra reading and activities to help herself learn. She also says her eyes hurt. She doesn't know any of her friends in class or even her teacher like she did in kindergarten. She misses all the fun extra activities at school, like assemblies and laughter and giggles with friends. Most importantly, she is devastated that her sister goes to preschool and she can't. She has stated that she does everything asked to be able to go, but cannot understand why she's not allowed. Private schools and daycares are thriving. They are in person 5 days a week without devices. Teachers are educating students in the pre-COVID traditional sense. Schools out of state are in person, even those more densely populated than Maryland. We are sadly one of 6 states left without an in-person option. Last night, Harford County rolled out a 1-day-a-week hybrid model plan. This is simply ridiculous. 1 day per week is not acceptable. Our teachers would be teaching both in person and virtual to the remaining students at home simultaneously. This is not sustainable. Our children would be in a school building staring at a computer as opposed to their bedrooms. Again, this is not sustainable. Where is the plan to fully reopen our schools 5 days a week without devices? It is imperative to the mental well-being of our children to do so. We cannot continue the way things are. Our children need to be in person with their teachers without devices 5 days a week. 1 day a week is simply appalling. I implore you to work with the counties and assist them in understanding the new guidance and the reality that our current knowledge of this disease and its transmission amongst our children is vastly different than once thought. I know many of you were invited by Harford County residents to listen to the Harford County BOE meeting last night. I hope many of you did and would love to hear your take on the comments from that board and any future follow-ups. There is so much to discuss on various topics and timing, but today my sole focus is doing everything I can to get our children back in school with their teachers without devices. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak at this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, we will have Dr. Jack Smith. Dr. Smith, welcome.
Thank you, President Crawford, and good morning to you and to all the members of the State Board of Education, Dr. Salmon and all the staff and others who are on this meeting this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Jack Smith, Superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools, and I'm here to make public comment this morning on behalf of the superintendents of Maryland about your later presentation and decisions around the transition of the high school assessments from independent assessments to end of course assessments. We as superintendents believe that this is a good, valid move that will benefit the students of Maryland. We support it. We support the transition plan that's been put forward. We also want to offer a caution that it is particularly important to spend the transition time modeling and testing, because the ratio of 20% that's recommended may be the right place, but until it's modeled and tested using large amounts of data, we won't know that. And so spending the next year and a half really understanding the effect on the 65,000 students in each cohort in Maryland is particularly important. For example, if a student has a very high grade on the end of course assessment and gets a D or an F in the course, should the student retake the course? Has the student learned the algebra? And conversely, if they have a very low grade on the assessment and they don't show a clear understanding of the assessments, but they earned a very good grade in the course, that doesn't mean they don't know the math, but it does mean there ought to be other ways to ensure they know the math, and that the grade is indicative of knowledge and learning and understanding, not of a grade that was awarded without that knowledge and learning and understanding. So we support the move. We think it makes sense. We support the transition time, and we support making sure that there is no barrier to students to graduation while you're making this change. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you all well and good health in the days ahead, and hope that we're all in the same room again before too long. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to have Dr. Patty Salins to address us this morning. Good morning. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Good morning, President Crawford, Dr. Salmon, and all board members. Thank you so much for this opportunity to comment on behalf of all superintendents across Maryland. And thank you for recognizing some of our struggles waiving the MCAP as a graduation requirement for our seniors and juniors. However, after nearly a year of struggles for all of our students, we believe it is prudent to waive all required mandated assessments for all students who are currently enrolled in state-assessed courses, and fully revisit the Graduation Task Force's recommendations for removing the high-stakes testing requirements that Dr. Smith just spoke of. We understand and support the fact that assessments are indeed important, and they are important to the improvement and measuring of student progress. But we also know that research is very clear, and it supports the fact that a student's GPA, and not just a single test score, is a greater indicator of a student's success. And this action now more than ever before would be advantageous for our students who are already going through the most stressful times of their life. We are working hard to return students to the classroom, as you all know, with the fear only that they will return to simply test and for their teachers to simply proctor after months of not being able to see their students in person. We are all concerned about their social and emotional fragile state of our students. I think that that's been expressed to the board many times, and I think we all are in the same understanding of that we want to return them to a classroom environment where they can engage and interact with their teachers and their peers and not be isolated to hours of testing. We all can agree that we want what is in the best interest of our children, and we believe that waiving all required mandated assessments for our students enrolled in state assessment courses is just that, what is best for our students. So thank you again for the opportunity to share comment with you. Please stay safe and healthy through the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to have Mr. Michael Brunitsky.
Yes.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, President Crawford. Good morning. And good morning, Dr. Simon and members of the board. I'm Michael Benitsky. I'm here to speak about decoupling the HSAs. I began teaching in Maryland in 1975. I retired as the curriculum specialist for secondary social studies in Frederick County in 2016 and served 4 years on the Board of Education in Frederick County. I have 45 years of experience in Maryland public schools. I began teaching when IDA had just become law. I was trained at an open space school, Wild Lake. My first job was in the junior high in Palmer Park, Maryland. I was teaching at the beginning of the accountability era. At that time, high stakes tests were just something in the future, but the Maryland functional tests had come along, and the debate concerning educating our children to be lifelong learners, college and career ready, versus teaching them to pass a test was a debate that we all had. The Maryland State Performance, or MSPAP, was in the future. I was a curriculum specialist when MSDE began writing the content standards, and I represented my county on the writing team for that, for the core learning goals, the next iteration, the voluntary curriculum. I was on the writing team for the high stakes exam, the government HSA, the scoring projects, the cut scores, the bridge projects, scoring them, spent half my career involved in accountability, functional, and high-stakes testing. But the greatest pleasure I ever had in teaching was interacting with students, questioning them, leading them to sources, correcting their essays, watching them grow. Testing didn't have anything to do with their organizational skills, their growth in debate, their recognizing bias, articulating an argument, or explaining a perspective, though it does measure their growth. Our students are currently learning in a virtual environment, which you heard from a parent a few moments ago. I'm the supervisor of 2 pre-service interns at Hood College. I've watched them struggle to make the connections with students that happen organically when students and teachers interact on a daily basis. The virtual environment is functional, but it's not easily mastered by all students, and some students suffer, as we heard from that parent. Those that have struggles have connection issues. They don't often have a safe environment. The HSA has been paused quite a few times over the years. Each time it was for a very good reason and lowered the pressure for students. The restart followed a logical plan, which this plan lays out, that allowed everyone to know the timeline and who would be affected. Parents, students, and teachers were all on the same playing field. It worked because it was planned with MSDE and LEAs all contributing to the final plan. Time for another pause and reset due to the incredible disruption this pandemic has created in our families, our communities, our schools, and our nation, and the reason we're meeting like this. So I wish you all well, and I hope you will vote to pause and follow the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Ms. Colleen Bernard.
Bernard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, President Crawford. Good morning, Dr. Salmon, President Crawford, members of the board. My name is Colleen Bernard, and I'm the current curriculum specialist for secondary social studies in Frederick County Public Schools. I've spent 23 years with the district as a social studies educator, with 18 of those years as a classroom teacher. 12 of those classroom years teaching American government. I previously state and county work groups related to the development. I firmly believe that the perpetuation of any democratic society is predicated on the education of its people. And I'm committed to ensuring a high-quality civic education for all students. However, the high-stakes nature of the government assessment serves this end. I've seen students get caught in what I would refer to as the doom loop, a cycle of remediation, retesting, and very often bridge work that robs them of other educational opportunities, devalues their unique and individual stories, perpetuates mindsets because achievement is based on a unidimensional measure that presents barriers to attaining a high school diploma. Unlinking the government and other mandated assessments from graduation requirements liberates our students from a yoke of accountability that was never intended to be borne by them. Even if the board were to vote today in support of the task force recommendation, the process takes time. Districts do not have in making decisions now about resource allocation while navigating virtual and hybrid models of instruction. Thus, I further request this board consider a waiver for all students enrolled this academic year in American government. It's truly in the best interest of our students to sit for a content-based exam that may or may not be required for graduation, consuming the limited face-to-face time students will have with teachers and their peers when we return to buildings. If FC employed this hybrid R had the first, which government teachers would have approximately 2,400 minutes of face-to-face instructional time based on an 80-minute block schedule rotating students into buildings 2 days a week. The government assessment requires 160 minutes of assessment time alone, usurping 7% of our face-to-face instructional time. Further, at least in FCPS, most students sitting for the assessment are in the 10th grade and also subject to taking the MISA and English 10 assessments. I understand the necessity to capture data that will help direct resources in instructional practices moving forward. However, the government assessment does not serve both of these purposes, as this is not a skills and processes only assessment that can be used formatively. Students will not revisit the American government content when they are taking the next course in our sequence, which in FCPS is Modern World History. Dr. Salmon's memo clearly states in the research supports that course grades are a better predictor of college and career success. I implore you to allow local districts to determine the assessment instruments needed to provide for the individual needs of students in completing courses in an academic year that exacerbated already existing opportunity inequities. In closing, I respectfully request the board vote to delink the assessment and waive the testing requirement for all students enrolled in the American government course in this academic year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. At this time, we'll turn to Ms. Cheryl Butler. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Morning. Great to see you, President Crawford and members of the board. I hope you're all well. This morning, I sent a response to the joint letter I received from Governor Hogan and Dr. Salmon just prior to the press conference held last Thursday. Educators across this state have heroically gone above and beyond throughout the ever-changing landscape of a global pandemic, unprecedented racial unrest, economic uncertainty, and historic political divisiveness, only to then, on Thursday, be publicly disrespected, provided false information, have their health and safety jeopardized with the elimination of metrics, and thoughtlessness of them now being told they don't need life-saving vaccines before return, and unbelievably actual threats by the governor and his accomplices, the Secretary of Health and State Superintendent of Schools. As a veteran teacher and former Baltimore County Teacher of the Year, I have personally worked with 3 superintendents and 2 interims, the longest serving being Dr. Grasmick. Whether or not you agreed or disagreed with Dr. Grasmick, she understood the independence of the department, the board, and her position, not as Secretary of Education, but as superintendent, removed from partisan politics. But most importantly, I am confident she would never have allowed any elected official to threaten legal action against the educators of Maryland. Our educators were hurt, angry, and demoralized. But instead of giving bullying tactics more air, we will continue to focus on the issue we have been advocating for throughout this closure. How do we safely and effectively transition schools to in-person learning while also allaying the fears of educators and parents and address the social, emotional, and academic needs of students who are surviving a pandemic? No arbitrary date for return will miraculously make the COVID cases disappear or bring back a sense of trust or subside fears. It is picked out of the air with no regard to the months of planning, collaboration, and sleepless nights that have occurred at each local district. I can assure you, educators want to be back in buildings with students when conditions are safe for everyone. We have been asking for each building to complete a health and safety walkthrough to ensure CDC, Maryland Health, and MSD mitigation procedures are consistently being followed, including PPE supplies, adequate ventilation, regular COVID testing, social distancing, and isolate positive cases. Locals should use previous health metrics for reopening with the help of the community to reduce community spread. And to partially quote Governor Hogan, we need to get educators the damn vaccines. And now we thankfully have federal plans and support being rolled out. We believe we can do this safely, effectively, while valuing each member of the education community without threats and ultimatums. And then we must look to our vision for recovery, which will need federal and state support to provide tutors, mental health services, along with expanded summer school opportunities and the transformation of our schools to truly meet the needs of all students and not just return to what was all too often not supporting the education of our Black and Brown students and their families living in poverty. We remain ready to collaborate. The question really has been and remains, do you? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. At this time, we'd like to recognize Ms. Lisa Lake. Ms. Lisa Lake.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to everyone, Dr. Salmon and the board members for hearing my comments this morning. Let me turn my video on. I am the parent of a Prince George's County high school freshman. And I'd like to also at this time commend Dr. Salmon's strong stand and the governor's strong stand for reopening classrooms for our students. Like thousands of Maryland students transitioning to new schools, my son was looking forward to beginning his high school experience. He finished middle school with nearly all A's and B's, and now he struggles to bring his grades up after failing his first quarter and still struggling to move up from D's and E's as we close this quarter. And so it's for my son and for the countless other Maryland students who are going through similar experiences, I am here to urge the board to ensure that school districts across Maryland have everything they need to act upon Governor Hogan's and Dr. Salmon's call for all school districts to move forward with hybrid learning in March. I also ask that they should ensure that any funds that these districts have received or will receive to reopen have been used for that specific purpose: PPE, staff sanitization, and the like. Students' need for in-person contact with their fellow classmates and their teachers is often overlooked and trivialized, particularly among older kids, teenagers. But we can see by their school performance and other tragic facts that this is in fact critical. When I started advocating on social media and the like for getting kids back into the classroom, I had no idea how adamantly opposed so many teachers were to getting their students back to some form of in-person learning. I really didn't see it coming. And that's because I know that these teachers grade our students' assignments every day. They love them and care for them when they're in their classrooms and can see how long and how deeply many of them are hurting. And so I naturally assumed that we all agreed that some level of in-person learning was the best thing. I was shocked and heartbroken at how wrong I was. This polarization between those who support reopening and those who don't, at least in Prince George's County, is doing more harm to our kids as these arguments, I believe, continue to stifle school districts that are concerned about the political blowback from either side. And the polarization need not exist. There should be no us and them in this situation. If we all care about the facts that are before us now, the failing grades, the number of children who are depressed and checking out, and even in the most tragic way, by suicides, it's clear that all virtual learning for the better part of a year for most of our kids has damaged them, and I pray irreversibly. There is only an us when you factor this in. So I urge you to start with the best interests of students. Also, let me say, with the time and money. Hello?
Yes, we're just trying now to, that's the time. We really appreciate your comments, and we appreciate the comments of all of our public comments. Again, thank you very much, everyone that took the time out to provide public comments. We will take your comments under advisement as we proceed. Now I'm going to move forward in our agenda to new business. These are consent items. The first of the items under the consent are the meeting minutes, and the personnel actions, budget adjustments, and the 2021 identification of comprehensive needs schools for the purpose of awarding the quality teaching stipends to certain teachers and non-administrative school-based employees. Now, these are consent items. The only thing I would like to bring to the board's attention and have their concurrence on it is that in the personnel area, we just need to add some additional explanations. The information we have there is correct. We just need to add some additional information. That has been pulled together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to based on the Roberts rules, the no objections, I'm going to then call for objections 3 times. If there are no objections, the consent agenda is approved. Objection, objection, objection. Hearing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. Thank you. At this time, goodness, we're actually ahead of schedule. We should note that for the record. Not sure that's ever happened since I've been here, guys. Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, we're now getting ready to go to reports to the board for discussion. And the first item is Dr. Salmon is going to show a video, in-person instructional video. Dr. Salmon?
Thank you, President Crawford, and good morning to all of our board members and all the people that are watching. Welcome. I am going to hope that this works by magic, that when I say show the video, somebody shows it. So we'll just be hopeful. We wanted you to see and wanted the public to see what I've been seeing when I've been out visiting schools, to show the public and how safe our schools are for in-person instruction. And so we have a video that we're going to share this morning that exemplifies some of the strategies that some of our systems are using. So with that, I'm going to pause and hope that the video appears shortly. And this will also be posted on our website today. So.
Jesus.
So Laura or John, are we getting the video up? I'm practicing patience here. I know that someone's out there.
Looks like magic is as problematic as technology.
I think you're correct. President Crawford, not to delay the meeting, we'll work on, there must be some kind of a technical problem. We'll work on getting this up after Zach does his legislative presentation, but I don't want to hold the meeting up right now.
Okay,
So
perfect.
if it's okay with you, I'd like to introduce Zach Hans, who is our Director of Legislation, and he's going to provide a legislative update. So Zach, good morning.
He was on just a minute ago. I'm sure he'll pop right in.
Sorry, President Crawford, we're having some issues this morning here at the State Department with internet connectivity, number one, and number two, with computers that do not have web cameras. So we're shuffling people around a bit to make sure that we can accommodate this meeting. I look forward to when our boardroom is redone at this point, because this is very, very frustrating. And I apologize to the people that are waiting online and our board members. We'll be right back in terms of Zach being on.
Can
everybody see me?
Yes, thanks, Zach. You're on.
Good morning, everybody. I really apologize for that. Thank you, Dr. Salmon, and good morning, President Crawford, Vice President Halley, and members of the State Board. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you with a brief overview of the legislative session today, as well as some of the processes and procedures that come along with session. We'll follow that up with a review of some of the pieces of relevant legislation that have been introduced at this juncture. Well, you'll have an opportunity to weigh in on today if you so choose. So you should have a set of slides in front of you. It's just a few things to guide us along as we discuss the General Assembly. So the legislative session is when the Maryland General Assembly convenes. They do so for 90 consecutive days, beginning on the second Wednesday in January. This year, the legislative session began on January 13th. So we have about 76 days remaining in the session now. The General Assembly is divided into the 141-member House of Delegates, presided over by Speaker Adrian Jones, and the 47-member State Senate, presided over by President Bill Ferguson. There are 10 standing committees, and most of the legislation that pertains to both the State Board and MSDE operate through 4 of those committees, which I will highlight momentarily. And both Mr. Crawford and Ms. Halley were able to meet with the chairs of each of these committees in the interim and in recent weeks. You'll probably hear folks refer to DLS quite frequently. This is a reference to the Department of Legislative Services, which provides staff to the General Assembly as a whole, as well as each of the committees and individual legislators. In your packets today, you should have a snippet of the DLS issues paper that outlines some of the topics DLS believes will be high-profile education-related topics for the session. This year, those topics include obviously the veto override of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, but also several areas surrounding the impacts of COVID-19 on the educational community. The next slide, which would be slide 4, just shows you some of the important dates to keep in mind, particularly the date that the legislative session ends, which is on April 12th this year. Also the crossover date when one chamber has to make sure their bills make it over to the other chamber for passage, which is March 22nd. And then the date that all the bills must be signed or vetoed, which is by June 1st this year. In terms of the committees, our primary focus lies in the Ways and Means Committee in the House and the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee in the Senate. Most education-related bills will track through these 2 committees, chaired by Ann Kaiser and Mr. Paul Pinsky. We also keep a close eye on the Appropriations and Budget and Taxation Committees, because these are the budget committees, and that's where a lot of the funding will flow through. The legislative process from there seems complex, but it's really quite simple once you go through it. For a bill to become law, it has to be read across the floor 3 times. When a bill is introduced, that's 1 reading. From there, if a committee decides to take action on a bill and bring it to the floor, that is the 2nd reading of the bill. This is the point where legislators can make amendments to the legislation. If the bill clears that hurdle, it is read across the floor 1 more time for final passage through the full chamber. At that point, it switches to the other chamber and the process begins all over again. If there are any additional amendments in that 2nd chamber, both houses have to agree, and sometimes we'll appoint a conference committee to sort out any differing amendments or accept one version of the bill passed by either chamber. So the next slide that you would have would say would detail the committee process, and this is really where you all can have a voice. Every bill, and there are typically thousands every session, gets a hearing. Once the bill gets assigned to a committee, they will hold a public hearing. This is when anybody is able to submit testimony in support of, in opposition to, or to just submit information on a specific bill. You can also support a bill but suggest amendments, so support with amendments if there are particular provisions of the bill that you or the board has concerns about. Like I said, you're all able to take positions like this, and we'll go into that a little bit later when we review a few specific bills. I'll come before you each month that the board meets during the session with a summary of relevant legislation. So on February 23rd, March 23rd, and then we'll do a final summary on April 27th. You will also receive a summary spreadsheet of all the legislation that we're tracking each Friday during session. So you probably should have received that twice already. A hearing schedule that just shows you everything that we're tracking and when those will have a hearing. And then a summary of bills that pertain specifically to education or to the state board. If you have any questions on specific bills, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Salmon, who will work with me to get you specific answers that you're looking for. As you know, the legislative session is incredibly fast-paced, and this year is particularly unique in that regard. Committees in both the House and the Senate require that testimony be submitted in a rather short 5-hour window from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., 2 business days prior to the hearing. So if there's a particular bill that the state board is wanting to submit testimony on, if it was the 28th, for example, I would have to submit that today. It may seem from the time that these hearings are scheduled that we may have more time to develop testimony than we really do. So any bills that require your immediate attention will be shared by Dr. Salmon to the board president and vice president so that you all have the opportunity to weigh in as quickly as possible. So here at the department, we review all relevant legislation pertaining to primary and secondary education. We read and analyze these bills with the program staff at MSDE to determine any fiscal and operational impacts. Last year, we reviewed around 300 bills and provided more than 200 fiscal notes to TLS. So far this year, we have another large batch of bills that we're keeping an eye on, with nearly 120 on our radar at this early point of the legislative session. So with that, I'd be happy to take any of your questions on the process of session before we go into a bill review.
Thank you, Zach. Are there any questions from the board before Sally?
Zach, could you just review for us the changes this year that are related to COVID processes?
Yes, so, and I was going to talk about this a little bit at the outset. So all of the committees are having their hearings virtually right now. The House of Delegates and the Senate have been holding pro forma sessions. So basically just a couple of members are on the floor to continue to introduce bills, but they haven't convened the full group since the opening day of session, just because, of COVID safety protocols to try and limit the number of people who are in one place. So I know that the House is not planning to return to full session until early to mid-February. I believe February 8th at the earliest. But they're continuing to do all of the hearings in the committees virtually. And as I said, some of the processes for submitting testimony are moved up. So you can't really submit testimony morning of if you want the legislators to be able to see what you have to say. And if you want to provide oral testimony, you also need to sign up 48 hours in advance. And there's also no printed copies. We're not delivering copies to Annapolis. They're doing everything online. So we have to use the Department of Legislative Services website to sign up staff and members of the board if they wish to testify.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board here? Mr. Wu, yes. And then Mr. Bartley. Mr. Wu, please.
So, yeah, thank you so much. I'm just wondering about taking a stance on certain bills as a board. Do we take a majority vote? Do we follow Robert's rules? I'm just wondering what that process would look like.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Crawford.
What we intend to do is we have one or two bills that we're going to look at in more detail. And our intent is to then have a vote from the board on whether or not we should take action X or Y on those particular bills.
take those votes at our monthly Board of Education meetings?
That's what our intent is. We're going to try to, where we can, we're going to try to address them during our meetings. They may be necessary for us to perhaps call a special meeting, especially during this fast-paced legislative session.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Bartlett.
Thanks, John. It would be great next time if you could have the presentation rolling live on the screen along with the nice slides you presented. You did a great job in it. I have two questions.
Zach Hand.
Excuse me?
Zach Hand. It's his name, Zach. I think you said John.
It's showing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem.
Showing up on the screen is John Rawson. But anyway, Zach, do you testify? One. Second, are you daily in Annapolis making sure that the Board of Education is heard and properly represented on some of this legislation? And describe that for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Bartley. Right in a normal session, I would be in Annapolis most of the time. Due to the COVID safety protocols, they've really limited the number of folks who can be in and out of the legislative buildings there. So I'm working mostly virtually or from the department. Your other question was on testimony. So the State Department of Education, we don't formally take positions on legislation. We submit letters of information on a lot of bills that may have impact on the department and the state board. At the state board's direction, we will work with Dr. Salmon and President Crawford to develop any positions that you decide to take as a board. We will take that charge from there and submit that testimony and provide you with the opportunity to testify if you so choose.
Dr. Getty.
Zach, when I tried to merge your two documents of the bills and the hearings, I noticed that a lot of hearings are at the same time. Like on February 3rd at 1:30, there's 5 hearings at the same time. How do you keep track of that?
So they're all scheduled for the same time, but it's just when it begins. So they'll have a list of bills for the day and they'll start at 1:30, but then they'll just go through them. So the 5th bill of the day could end up being at 3 o'clock, but the hearing for that bill technically starts at 1:30. I hope if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Oh, Dr. Lee, yes.
Hi, Zach. Thanks so much for that very clear presentation. Can you clarify, do we only get one chance, or does anybody only get one chance to testify? Or when it goes to the second house, like the state senate, does it have another chance to testify? And do they ever hold the testimony in tandem so people don't have to spend twice as much time doing this?
Yeah, so you'll have a second opportunity to testify if the bill were to pass the House. Then it would get a hearing in the Senate as well, and you could submit testimony there. This year, for certain bills that had already passed one chamber last year and was essentially the clock ran out on them because they had a shortened session because of COVID, they're doing some sponsor-only hearings this year. Where you could only submit written testimony as opposed to being able to do oral testimony as a member of the general public. Certain bills, if they're large enough, like the blueprint for Maryland's future, they did a joint hearing of all of the relevant committees to hear that bill. But typically they will do separate hearings in the House and the Senate.
Any other questions? Ms. Howard.
I just want to comment to the full board, because you're getting the full list of all of the proposed legislation. You're free at any time to contact Clarence and myself and Zachary to ask further questions or to ask for more discussion.
Thank you. The other thing I'll just mention is what we have been doing. Zach has been doing a great job at helping us meet with the legislative leadership. And we found that reaching out to these folks before the legislative session has been pretty good because we've been able to talk to them ahead of this time. We figured once the session started, it would be a madhouse. So I think it's helpful. So, Zach, I think we're ready to proceed with the second phase of your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. So we have 6 bills today that we're going to talk about. I'd just like to start by, reminding the board that the General Assembly has not yet voted on the override for the veto for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Since the bill originated in the House, they must be the chamber that initiates the override of that veto. And since they're not planning to convene the full House of Delegates to consider additional veto overrides until earlier mid-February due to the COVID mitigation efforts that I mentioned earlier. So I just thought that I would address that from the outset so that you're aware. So the bills that we will discuss today are ones that either impact the state board directly and have upcoming hearings. So the first bill for you to consider today is House Bill 138. This would require the state board to develop and implement an age-appropriate program on the awareness and prevention of sexual assault and abuse for students in grades 6 through 8. I want to note that the bill did not make it past the hearing last year, despite having a pretty lengthy sponsor line in the House of Delegates. And so far this year, it's just Delegate Johnson on the sponsor line. The General Assembly has typically resisted curricular mandates such as this, but I wanted to bring it to your attention in case you wanted to discuss or take a position.
Zach, do you want us, as you walk through, do you want to walk through them, and then as we go to identify the ones where we may wish to take a position or something? The best way to do it?
Yeah, if there's no discussion or you don't plan to take a position, we'll do it one at a time, and I'll just make a note of that as I go through.
Okay, very good. Dr. Lee, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, so for this one, I'm just wondering if there's a consideration. I believe we're recommending for the graduation requirements that health is now one credit. So could we put this topic as one of the topics to be covered under health?
So we submitted a letter of information from the State Department of Education that to inform the General Assembly that a lot of these areas are already encompassed in the health education framework that is currently in place.
Can I just suggest that maybe you could just say right away what has already been done, so then we can just say great instead of
Sure.
New ideas. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to move to the next one.
Okay, so the next bill for your discussion is House Bill 465. This is a bill that we've seen introduced before. This bill would require the position of state superintendent to be confirmed by the Maryland State Senate following the selection of the individual by the state board. It also disallows someone who currently serves on the board from being appointed as the state superintendent, or if they served on the state board in the last year. The bill did pass the House of Delegates last year, but ran out of time in the Senate due to the abridged legislative session.
I think this is one where we would want to submit a position on, and perhaps even consider both written and oral testimony, whatever seems to be the appropriate way of addressing that. And I think it would be on essentially the argument would be on two grounds. One is maintain the independence of state education, and the second one is a pragmatic argument about that it could have a chilling effect on potential candidates willingness to compete for the superintendent position. I think those would be essentially the two arguments for it. Dr. McCarthy.
So I agree heartily with you, Mr. Crawford. I also think that this legislation has a very negative bent towards this board. And I think it just is very, it's just, I'm weighing my words. I just don't think that it's a good idea, and I don't like the implications it portrays, in addition to the reasons that you set out.
Thank you. Ms. Halley, and then Dr. Lee.
I just think in terms of how we've engaged stakeholders, and particularly the legislative stakeholders, from the search committee's point of view, it might be helpful to have some comments. So I don't know, President Crawford or Senator Bates, if you'd like to talk about how the search committee has engaged stakeholder discussion about the selection process.
Yes, please.
The search committee, or the search firm, has provided much broader opportunities for people to comment, because they did the online. It was more responses, I think, than we received last time when we were looking. So there's been a lot of opportunity for people to comment. And yesterday in our meeting, I asked them, what impact would this have on our search and our ability to get a candidate? And it would indeed be a chilling effect. A person put their name out, it impacts their current position, and then to have it rejected, it really is troubling. And this is our responsibility. So I think it's really frightening that this would be usurping our ability or our duty. So anyway,
I'll just add and then go to Ms. Morrow. The other thing the search firm said was that it's very likely that our top candidate will be a top candidate in other searches. And the concern that the search firm had raised was, let's assume that we're selecting someone from out of state, or maybe even within state. Their name gets submitted to the Senate. It becomes public. And then the worst case is, for any number of reasons, the Senate doesn't confirm. With that kind of situation weighing over these candidates, they may choose not to. And in fact, I had a conversation not long ago with a superintendent here in the state of Maryland and discussed this. And the person said, if this were in place, they would not apply. If this is so. I think I believe it was Senator Bates said, I think right now, of all the things that we can do, the number one thing that we have to do and do well is find a great heir apparent this position.
Yeah.
So, and now let me go to Ms. Morrow.
I was just going to chime in. I agree with both what Dr. Melanie McCarthy and Senator Bates are saying, that I oppose this. I mean, even just from a very practical timeline, as Zach pointed out, the legislative session ends April 12th, but the timeline we're working with, where the search firm goes later than that into April. And it puts us in a very strange position of potentially hiring somebody and them not being confirmed for another 6 months plus. I think the Senate already has a role in confirming all of us as board members. And if they do not feel like that is going appropriately, I would rather see them address that side than add another layer to the search for the state superintendent. So,
we'll go to, thank you very much. Go to General Sumter and then to Mr. Bartley. And then what I would like to do for the sake of time would be to then call for a motion. And then based on the vote, we would then work with Zach and Dr. Simpson to draft an appropriate response. So General Sumter?
Yes, I wanted to make that we needed to impose.
General Sumter, you are breaking up. We really cannot understand.
I believe he said he wanted to make a motion to oppose the legislation.
Okay. Let me first hear from Mr. Bartley. He raised his hand, and then we'll go right back to you for the motion. Mr. Bartley.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm against this legislation because it politicizes the position of the superintendent of schools, and it's not in the best interest of the children to do that. I think Lori Morrow also pointed out the difficulties in timing and the reality that the state legislature doesn't meet for the whole year. And so if we leave it up to them to approve it, there's a chance that it won't get done. And then to politicize the position also takes away the autonomy of the State Board of Education. I think the State Board of Education was founded many years ago with the idea that it would be separate and apart from the legislature to make these decisions in the best interest of the children without politics being involved, and allowing them to make the decision on who the superintendent of schools would be rather than this autonomous board centralizes the power in the hands of the few instead of distributing the power and the decision-making abilities of all the citizens of Maryland. And therefore, the Board of Education should resist at all costs allowing the legislature to make this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn now to General Sumter. I believe you are making a motion that we oppose the legislation.
Yes, it would really stymie our search, and to get the best qualified candidate, it needs to remain the way it is.
Thank you. We have a second. I believe that was Ms. Morrow. You had seconded, correct? Ms. Morrow. Are there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, let us then take a roll call vote. Dr. Simpson, can you quickly take a roll call vote so we have that for the record?
Yes. Mr. Bartley?
Yes.
Ms. Bates?
Yes.
Mr. DeShiel?
Yes.
Dr. Getty?
Yes.
Dr. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Halley?
Yes.
Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. McCusker? Ms. McCusker?
I abstain.
Dr. Millie McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Marble?
Yes.
General Sumter?
Yes.
Dr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Mr. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
That completes the voting.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Crawford, the vote was 13 in favor with 1 abstention.
Okay.
It passed.
Thank you. So we'll work offline with Zach and Dr. Simpson to draft the response, and we will keep you in the loop as we go. We've got to move quickly. Hearing, I think, is February 3rd. So.
Yes, and we will have to submit testimony on that bill on February the 1st.
On February 1st. So we got this week. Yeah, basically. Okay. We'll keep you posted. Watch your emails. Zach, please.
Okay, thank you. So next we have House Bill 496. This is a complex piece of legislation, but I'm going to do my best to explain it very clearly. So the bill is titled the Counselors Not Cops Act, and it alters the purpose of the Safe Schools Fund within the School Safety Subcabinet. to provide grants that are allocated to local school systems for providing mental and behavioral health services, trauma-informed care, and several other things. And it no longer allows for the use of funds for enhancing the SRO program. It also requires a lot of data to be submitted by local school systems to the Center for School Safety, including on the number of counselors, number of school psychologists, number of community schools, among several other data points. One caveat of the bill, though, is that it requires the state board to adopt regulations to carry out these requirements. While the Center for School Safety is an independent unit within MSDE, typically the School Safety Subcabinet, which Dr. Salmon serves as chair of, serves as the governing board for the center and adopts regulations. I have spoken with the sponsor of the bill to make them aware of the distinction between the School Safety Subcabinet and the State Board as it relates to regulations. And I'll keep you aware, posted on any of the amendments to the legislation, but I wanted you to be aware of how it requires the Center for School Safety to collect the information, but the State Board to adopt regs, which is typically not the process. So if that doesn't change in later iterations of the bill, may need to submit further testimony. Happy to answer any questions on that.
Right now, is this something that we need to take some action right now, or do we wait to see? Just trying to understand.
Yeah, I think you can wait to see for right now, but since it does require the state board to do something, I felt it was important to bring it to you today with the bill hearing being on February the 3rd. So if your direction is just to monitor the bill and see if that stays the case, I can do that. Or, if you want to take some active action, we can do that as well.
Sure. Let's hear from our board members. We have Mr. Bartley, then Ms. McCusker.
President Crawford, could I make a statement before?
Yes, ma'am.
Here, I just want to point out that it is likely that I'll be recommending, as the chair of the School Safety Subcabinet, for our executive director, Kate Hession, to deal with this and make the process known to the legislator as well. So that will be the action that I'm taking as chair of the subcabinet. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Barton, Mr. McCusker, and then Dr. Lee.
If I understand you correctly, there's mention of SRO programs in the reduction of funds with regards to SRO programs, correct?
That's correct.
And for the record, what does SRO mean?
School Resource Officer, I apologize.
And that's a police officer readily on campus with the students, right?
That is correct.
I'm for SRO programs and any reduction in funding with regards to the school resource officer being eliminated from the campus environment. I don't think it's in the best interest of the teachers or the students. I think an SRO officer on the school was a positive influence for me. I didn't grow up in an urban environment. I grew up in a suburban environment, but nonetheless, the positive presence of a police officer there was good. I think it helped build community relations with the police force and also helped us understand and appreciate the roles that police officers play in our communities and keeping us safe. I think in these times when there's a great deal of conflict between general public and police officers, that eliminating the police officers from the campus and not having them be a community bridge is problematic. I am, however, for the increase in funding for behavioral and social counselors on campuses to help address students' concerns and problems as a first resort. But I think the safety of teachers and students with regards to the real possibilities of violence, drugs, and weapons on campus are best addressed as a last resort by a school resource officer. And any defunding of school resource officers, I am adamantly opposed to. Thank you.
Good. Dr. Salmon, is that potentially something that you could address in your response, potentially?
Well, that is certainly the position of the School Safety Subcabinet. I don't want to take time today.
No, I understand, but I'm just...
But that is, we trained all of the school resource officers across the state in a 40-hour training in the last 2 years, which I also participated in. It is certainly the advocacy of the school safety subcabinet to continue this program. And I'm sure that Kate Hession will do a great job in conveying that information to the legislation.
Okay, very good. I participated as well. It was a good day. Ms. McCusker?
Thank you. Zach, because we have a couple people speaking to the maker of the bill about the process between the two different boards and the adoption of regulations, do you anticipate that they're going to do some amendment before they bring the bill forward again?
She indicated that they would take a look at that aspect of the bill. So I would say that we can keep an eye on it and see if that does change in the hearing and the amendment process, as well as if the subcabinet does submit a letter of information, just alerting them to that distinction.
Okay. All righty. Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I just wanted to echo Mr. Barkley's comments as well, that I am concerned about removing funding for the SRO program. And just in searching right now, I see there's a lot of contention about whether there should be SROs in schools. But I don't think we should just give the locals no choice in the matter and remove this line of funding unless there's another source of funding for very important topic. I think we just need one active shooter incident to then regret that we don't have any police officers at all in the school.
Very good. Thank you. Great comments. Zach, if you want to move to the next item.
Yes, sir. So our second to last bill today is House Bill 597. This would require the state board to adopt regulations allowing for a probationary employment period for first-time child care teachers if the individual is enrolled in pre-service training and also holds an associate's degree or bachelor's degree in several primary or secondary education related fields. If the employee doesn't complete their employment period by the end of 6 months, the bill would then require that the child care center reassign or dismiss the employee. This bill passed the House last year, but ran out of time in the Senate for a hearing due to the coronavirus protocols. And this bill hearing is on February the 3rd.
Dr. Sam, is this an area where you are going to address? Is there any help us there? Is this something?
Well, we sent a letter of information, right, Zach? And
it's important. Yeah.
Again, it is, the department doesn't take the positions, but the state board can. And it is an area of concern from the standpoint that, we are in charge of very young children, and we have to make sure that the people that are taking care of them have the proper credentials. And we do have many ways to work in providing technical assistance with our people that want to become child care providers and workers. We're working very closely with universities and other programs. So, we can work with you if the board decides to take a position against this particular piece of legislation.
Thank you. We get a sense of the board. Is this a topic that we would want to work on? Senator Bates?
Madam Superintendent, I can't remember. Did we take a position last year?
Question, did we take a position last year? That was the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was our
I don't believe that the state board took a position on this last year. But again, it did run out of time at the end of the session. So that's a consistent theme with a lot of these bills, is that they sort of started late in the process last year.
Dr.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Crawford. I had done a little research about this topic last year on the child care issue, and I just wanted to bring up the concern that it is really hard to find child care workers. It's not a very well-paid field. and there's more demand than there is supply. I think anything that we can do to help ease that transition and help these childcare centers be able to hire new people, train them, and work with them, and pay them. I think that's another problem is in the beginning, if they're not licensed, a lot of times they have to basically do a work study type of thing, and they're not being paid to actually learn and help with providing the service. So I guess I just want to add a caution not to necessarily totally eliminate this and to try to find some way to help Maryland families, because they're the ones that are disadvantaged, unable to find childcare. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional comments? Because what I'll do is I will seek a motion. I would suspect what we would do is a motion to, Dr. Salmon, your position has been to oppose this bill. This is your position paper was to oppose it.
Our letter of information, Zach, do you want to give them a little more detail about what we put in that letter so that they can understand how we respond to these bills?
Yeah, so we usually lay out what the current process is and how, it, particularly for this, how it could be a challenge in terms of the certification processes to get this done in the timeline that they've laid out. From more of a policy standpoint, that would be the state board would take a position on that aspect of it, whereas when we submit letters of information, they're typically on processes that we already have in place and how it could be challenging for the department to, could be potentially challenging for the department to execute that function.
Ms. McCusker, thank you. Ms. McCusker?
Thank you. I just want, I guess, to clarify or to be clear, I don't know that we want to say that we oppose having training and pre-service training for childcare providers. I would think that as a board, it would be important to us at the MSDE that we continue to have high standards for the people that care for the children across the state. But it does seem like maybe this is more of a timing issue of how long people would have to get those credentials, or is it that we oppose them having those credentials?
I think it's a lot of the concerns as well that the latter and that Dr. Salmon laid out in her concerns that she mentioned about the legislation.
So it's largely timing, if I recall. Did I get that correct? Okay.
That's what the letter of information will reflect.
Okay. So if that is it,
so
do we have a motion?
We can monitor this, President Crawford, and see what happens after this first hearing. And then we can, if we need to have a call, we can do that if we need to do something different. Again, it didn't go anywhere, but it could have legs this year.
Is this one where we would be comfortable monitoring and then addressing, just sort of get a sense of the board that we would monitor and then address as needed? Sort of seeing here ahead.
Wait a minute.
Yes. We'll go to, have not heard from Mr. DeShield, then to Senator Bates.
Okay.
No, thank you. I just thought I would suggest that we do monitor this and see what happens and follow it when it moves a little bit further along in the process.
Thank you, Senator Bates.
Right. My question is, have we sent a letter of information already? I mean, we could do that while we're still monitoring. If we want to let them know that there's issues.
We've already sent the letter.
You sent it. That's okay. That's all I need to know. Thanks.
Okay. So I'm taking a sense from the board is that we will monitor and we would take action as if needed based on the progress of the bill. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the last bill of the day, Senate Bill 464. This bill requires the State Board and the Professional Standards and Teacher Education Board to develop rules and regulations for the certification of educational interpreters in public schools. The bill requires educational interpreters in public schools to obtain certification on or before July 1st of 2028. And it requires the state to explore opportunities for fiscal support for educational interpreters. The Professional Standards Teacher Education Board voted to oppose this bill last year, and it did not get out of the House of Delegates last year either. The Department of Education will likely work on a letter of information. The window for submitting that hasn't come up yet, but this is another one that would require the State Board to develop regulations.
Dr. Lee, then Dr. McCarthy.
Hi, Zach. Can you comment on whether there is a deficiency in this area? Why was there a need for this? Do you know?
Difficult to speak to the intent of the sponsor, but I would say it was probably with the interpretation that there was a deficiency in this area. I know that there are some provisions of the bill that the State Department currently doesn't do, which is reimbursing interpreters for any of the fees that they have, that they incur in the process of obtaining certification. The department does not do that in any other certification areas that I'm aware of.
So we have, so Dr. Lee, who was the next person? I'm sorry, okay, so Ms. McCusker, and then I think it was Ms. Halley. Go ahead, Ms. McCusker. Oh no, was it Dr. McCarthy, then Ms. McCusker, then Ms. Halley. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. My question was similar to Dr. Lee's. I think we had public comment last year regarding this, and it was from an interpreter, and I think interpreters are in favor of this, and that's as far as my memory will take me. So I would like to know more about it personally, and I don't know if Dr. Salmon has more information on this.
Well, we can certainly, once we get to the point where we're ready to submit a letter of information, we can run that by the board so that you have more information to make an informed decision about.
I mean, I certainly think for children who are severely hearing impaired in the schools, this is an important service. And I think the high road intent is to make sure that people who are doing this service in the schools have the appropriate qualifications and training. But I don't know that for sure for fact.
Yeah, we'll definitely get more information to you as we interpret what the bill drafter intended.
Very good. Ms. McCusker?
To piggyback on what Dr. Manley McCarthy said, we did have testimony on this bill from some educational interpreters in favor of it in meeting last year. I have also been contacted by a couple of different people in favor of this bill who are interpreters across the state. I don't know that they're in favor of every single detail. I don't know all of the details, but they are generally in favor of trying to have some regulations in place so that the services that are being provided to our children with hearing disabilities and who need sign language interpreters have interpreters that are trained in specifically educational language, so that what teachers are saying is interpreted more accurately seems to be the concern. So I wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's Ms. Halley?
Yes, I was just going to comment on the public speaker and their previous plea that we need to have the qualifications be transparent for people who are providing these services, and they should be of high quality.
Okay. So on this one, the sense is that we will monitor, the department will As we get closer, the department will share more information as they learn the intent of the sponsor. And then at that point, we will decide what, if anything, is an appropriate role for the board on this topic. Okay, that's head nod. Okay, that's the consensus of the board on this topic.
Okay, that is all of the bills that I had for today. As I said earlier, if you have further questions about other legislation, feel free to reach out to Dr. Salmon, who will work with me to get you the answers you're looking for.
Ms. Morrow?
Can I just make one request for, I know we have 2 more board meetings that will be during the session. If there's any specific bills that are going to be addressed, I think it would be helpful for us to see the letter of information before the meeting, if we could get those like at least the day before when we get public comment.
We'll try to take a look at it. The timing is very unusual since we now have a requirement to get things to the legislation offices 4 days ahead, Zach?
Yeah, so it has to be submitted 2 days ahead. This, for example, is a very unusual window because we have not shared our letter of information for these hearings yet because they're on the 3rd and you have to submit on the 1st, but you won't have another meeting before that time. So they needed to come before you today. So that's just that awkward overlap in timing with the unusual protocols this session. But we can, I can do my best to work with Dr. Simon to do that.
Right, so anytime.
I understand.
Anytime
I'm just talking about
we'll get it to you.
Yeah, for our next board meetings, it would help if we had the information beforehand, if it's available.
Let's Sam, how many hearings do you have on the budget? 1 or 2, right? I think we talked about it.
Yeah, like 14.
And how many of these bills are we going to be preparing? You're going to be preparing position papers for, on more or less?
Well, I think we've already done how many, Zach?
We've done 15 letters of information thus far, and it's hard to predict from here on out how many more we may have to do depending on what's introduced.
And then the other issue is that we have questions that we get before the budget hearings, and they are pages and pages of questions that we have to prepare and get back to them 48 hours between the time we get them and the time that the hearing is held. And that's a new requirement, and that's going to be a really tough window. And the other thing is, we're responding to questions all the time from legislators. Zach's fielding those. We're getting back answers to folks. It's just a very intense time right now with the staff. And the other thing is, I'm trying to remember the JCR reports have been going out. I think Zach did 27 in one day. These are, can be hundreds of pages long.
JCR, you may want to.
Yeah.
Joint Chairman's report, so that comes out every session as well, and it requires various departments to submit so many reports. We had 103 due in 2020.
So we've been very, very busy already this session trying to get those in on time. And of course, all of they have to be reviewed by the people that are writing them, and also by their assistant superintendent, then by the deputy, then by Zach, and then by myself. So it's a very intense process. Thanks for asking.
Dr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. I wanted to bring up again, which I brought up, I think, every year, that in looking at these 20-some bills that you singled out, Zach, there's about 4 new requirements for a new database or a new spreadsheet or a new report. And I hope you guys can continue to monitor all the new requirements. And looking at your list of over, it seems like 100 there's 100 on your total list. If you just extrapolate this, that's about 16 new requirements with all the things that are being presented. So I keep asking that we should have a rule. Every new report means some other report has to get, killed, because you can't keep growing all these reporting requirements, or that's what feeds the bureaucracy. And we want our folks to be focusing on the kids and helping the kids. So just my pet peeve on the record again this year.
Sure. And what we also do is not only do we add more reports and requirements, we cut staff.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. You know that I always take that forward when I talk to the committee chairs. And there was some really great work I know that I had with Ann Kaiser last year, who was very active in trying to get many of these reports sunsetted. So I do thank her for her efforts, and I know that hopefully going forward they'll take a look at some of that.
Dr. McCarthy?
So I don't want to belabor points, but Zach, on the other legislation that you had listed, are you monitoring that? Are you thinking some of it won't go forward and you're just listing?
Yeah, so yes, we're monitoring all of those. Some we've submitted letters of information on. The reason they're not on the top of your list today is because they've either had hearings already or because the hearing is later in the month of February.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Zach. Appreciate it greatly. He does a great job. He's helped us tremendously. That's Sam. You want to try the video?
I do. Let's try this video, and we'll just all be. What's the new word we're seeing out now and about? Hopeful.
Hopeful.
All right. So Mia, Laura, whoever's doing this, let's try to get this going. Thank you.
I hear you. This is Mia, and I am attempting to share it now, so please pardon the silence.
When I was growing up watching Wizard of Oz, magic just seemed to just happen. You just sort of click your heels and stuff would just happen. Everything has become so much more complex these days. Oh, here we are. Okay.
As an educator who does this every day, I tell you that if everyone turns off their cameras, that it lowers the bandwidth and videos run better. Just a little teacher tech tip. We might all want to turn off our cameras. We are
Okay, so were you able, this is Mia, were you able to see it? It was playing on.
No.
No, we saw nothing. So let's test this during the break, and let's move on, if it's okay, President Crawford, to our presentation from Dr. Williamson.
Okay, this is on the end of school assessment for high school.
Yes, this is tab F in your agenda. So Dr. Williamson, I'm just going to let you go ahead.
Okay.
I know that the board is well aware of, we had a huge queue set to it at our last board meeting.
Okay, and we certainly did. And thank you, Dr. Salmon. Good morning, President Crawford, Ms. Halley, and members of the board. Dr. Judkins, Dr. Jennifer Judkins and I are here today. And I think Vera Shaw is joining us, and we're here to request the movement of our current Maryland High School graduation exit assessments in algebra, English, science, and government to be end-of-course assessments that account for 20% of the student's final grade in the respective high school level courses. We're on the first slide, Jennifer, the front page. Thank you. Yeah, and can you make it large? The full screen. Last month, I came before you and reviewed the 12 recommendations of the high school graduation task force. 11 of those recommendations had been approved previously by the board to move forward. Only one recommendation, the one dealing with assessments, had not been brought before the board and discussed. During the December board meeting, research and rationale for the change was shared, and I indicated that we would return to the January board meeting and request approval to move forward with this recommendation. Now we can go to the next slide, Jennifer. Okay, the high school graduation task force believed it was important to delink the high school assessments based on research regarding the negative impact of exit exams on various groups of students. Some of that information was reflected in the high school task force report and was included in your materials last month. And hopefully you had an opportunity to look through some of those materials, but if not, we'll cover some of the basic research just for a few minutes today. So in the next few slides, I'll share a little bit of additional information about that. This is an overview of the research that you'll see on the next couple of slides. There are basically two ways, when taken together, that research supports a move to end-of-course exams. First, research shows that exit exams themselves are not the strongest predictors of student success during and after high school. Course grades, particularly, are much stronger predictors of success. And then second, research shows that exit exams disproportionately harm disadvantaged students. They often don't have the supports they need. Students get frustrated, and often we find they drop out of school. So in the next two slides, I'll just go into a little bit more detail of these 2 points, including some selected citations. And in the interest of time and space, we didn't include every study, but there are more included in the full task force report if you'd like to review them. Let's go to the next. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So we've included this slide with additional information regarding the value of course grades versus standardized assessments. Clearly, there has been much interest in this area. For many, many years, there's been the concern that a one-day standardized assessment was used to judge the knowledge, value, and motivation of a student, rather than using the student's work that they had been doing over the course of the year or the course. And likely this included assessments along the way, so they were being assessed, but in chunks just relative to that course along the time that they took the course. Take a look at the two studies. In the first, 9th grade course grades were a better predictor of students graduating from high school and being successful in college than they were for standardized assessments. Standardized assessments did not predict as well as the course grades. And actually, before I left Queen Anne's County as superintendent, and I know when Dr. Salmon was in Talbot, Chesapeake College worked with us, and they ended up running a study for the very same thing, to look at what kinds of grades predicted good success. And they often found, or they did find in their study, that they could determine if students were going to be successful in a college level course rather than having to take a remedial course prior to entering a non-credit course. In the second study, Exit exams were not found to be a good predictor of student employability or earnings, and that's something that got run through some additional research. So you'll see there's a lot of research here, and there are a lot of things in your guide that will help you. I'm going to go to the next slide, Jennifer. And we're going to talk about equity and impact. And this was an area that really was of concern to our board members, to our task force members. And we've included this slide, and I've lost my slide, of course I have. So we'll just look at it. There were a lot of slides that just showed that it was often our students that were low-income students or urban students that had difficulty with those exit exams. And sometimes they needed extra support. They ended up sometimes not being successful in the assessments, and then they would have to get involved in retaking tests. Sometimes they had been successful in the course, didn't pass the test, and ended up having to take some kind of a support class, like a bridge class, to be able to pass. And sometimes that was very discouraging to them, and they often we found some of those students dropped out of school. And there was also a study across multiple states that found that exit exams increased dropout rates for 12th grade students, and especially large effects on African American students. And a California study finding the negative impacts of high school exit exams on graduation rates. And so that was of particular interest to our task force, and one of the reasons that they really did want to turn around and start looking at, let's eliminate the exit exams, keep the assessments, make them a part of the course grade, and it would count as 20% of the grade. And so Jennifer, next slide, and I think you're picking up here.
I am. Thank you, Dr. Williamson. Thank you, President Crawford, Dr. Salmon, members of the board, and I'm Jennifer Judkins. I'm the Assistant State Superintendent for Assessment, Accountability, and Information Technology, and I will continue our presentation. Our research office looked at data comparing course or grade performance to performance on the assessment. Although we do not expect perfect alignment between standardized tests and course grades, we should have better alignment than we currently have. So including a standardized end of course or EOC assessment in a course grade can improve this alignment. So we have a couple of displays of data here. In the table in the bottom right corner, about 64% of the students who pass the class also pass the assessment. So that is what we would expect. They do well in the class, they do well on the assessment. However, if you look at the bottom middle column, we can see that 29% of the students who failed the assessment passed the class. And then this is for English language arts. And then we have very similar results for mathematics, for Algebra 1, about that same 64% and 29%. Okay, according to our ESSA plan for accountability, schools are held accountable for achievement in math and English language arts. Research suggests that switching to an end of course model does improve achievement for all students, as shown in the research that Dr. Salmon pointed out at the beginning of the presentation. Several states have changed their high stakes assessments from graduation requirements to end of course assessments. In 2019, the states that had moved to an end of course model are listed here. And states that kept assessments tied to graduation, for example, Oklahoma, decided to reverse that direction. So MSDE will offer end of course assessments whenever a graduation course is taught. So therefore we would offer EOCs in winter, spring, and summer. The test blueprint, which basically describes the makeup of the content that is covered, as well as the emphasis of the content on the test, those current blueprints for all of our assessments, we would like to remain intact. Those blueprints have been approved by our State Technical Advisory Committee. They have been designed to measure the breadth and the depth of our state content standards, as well as meet federal accountability. Therefore, we intend to keep the blueprints as we move forward. The recommendation from the high school task force was for the end of course assessments to count as 20% of the final grade. As we transition to end of course, our recommendation, MSD recommends that the new end of course assessments go into effect starting in the 2022-2023 school year. This transition period will allow for a work group to be convened to determine how the assessments will work alongside classroom grading how they will be administered, and overall implementation. Students will be required to participate only in the assessments, both as a graduation requirement and for accountability during this transitional time. Passing the assessment would not be required during this period. And then I know that Mary Gable will be going over COMAR changes upcoming, but our suggested COMAR for the transition to end of course, beginning with the 2022-2023 school year to be awarded the Maryland High School Diploma. All students, including elementary and middle school students who take high school level courses, shall take the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment for Algebra, Science, English, and Government. The assessment shall count for 20% of the student's final grade in the respective Algebra, Science, English, and Government course.
So basically, we are asking for you to approve us moving from the exit exams to the end of course exams to begin in the 22-23 school year.
Okay. Very good. Okay, great. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Dr. Lee and Ms. McCusker, and then Ms. Halley and Senator Bates.
Yes.
Thank you, President Crawford. Carol, you make a very convincing case for this. I'm very supportive. I guess my question is, if we already know this to be true, that all these benefits, is there any way we can speed this up? And why do we have to wait 3 years or 2 years? Could we conceivably start this with the 2021 to 2022 year, or I would say even as early as this year? Can you please comment on that?
Well, I don't think there's any way to start it this year because we've already started with our assessment program. The issue has to do with being organized in terms of how we're going to do the grading.
Okay.
Because we have different grading systems across the state, so that's got to be looked at. There'll be some administrative things that have to be worked out. We really thought we'd need to convene a group. And Jennifer could speak to, we had talked about if it was even going to be possible with the assessment that we have, because I believe there have to be some modifications. Jennifer, you want to talk to that?
Sure. Yeah, we had hoped to be able to implement it in the upcoming school year, but as we pulled and worked with all our curriculum folks, we did find that we're going to need some time to actually work with classroom teachers. We're also going to need to look at the best way to transition our skill scores into a classroom grade, and then we just need to look overall at implementation. And so we determined that we needed that additional year to be able to do that. So in the interim time, continuing to have students take the test for accountability as is required by federal law, and then really have a smooth transition in the 2022-2023 school year.
I guess my concern is because the way you've structured it, it's like for 2 years or 3 years, people take it, but they don't have to pass it. So then that kind of happened in our county for the tests where people didn't study and they flunked it and they didn't care because they had an A going in and they knew they were going to pass it. Then it makes everything look bad because then everybody's worried, like, how come they're not learning? And then it's because they don't care. I feel like if you structure a test that basically they don't have to pass, many of them won't pass because they're not going to put the effort into it because everybody's, balancing priorities. And I feel like it's wasting a lot of time, it seems, to administer tests that don't count.
I think, Dr. Lee, this is Karen Salmon. I'd like to comment. I think you made very good points. And I think what we'll do is certainly, we heard from superintendents. We've been discussing this with them for a long time. And we heard from them that they really wanted to have a transition time built in for students. But we can go back and look at the processes that we were concerned about taking time and seeing if we can't speed this up, because I agree with you. It seems like a long time. I'd like to see it happen much quicker as well. So I think we will take that back for consideration and see what we can do with your suggestion.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. McCusker is, I think, next. Or was it Ms. Yeah.
Thank you. As we do have a transition period, whatever that ends up being, one of the comments this morning made some sense to me in that when we're in that transition year, we look at whether or not that 20% number ends up being a good landing spot, like we think it's going to be, or if it looks like it's not a good landing spot, is that something we might be able to revisit in the future if we find that it needs to be higher or lower, whatever. Is that a consideration?
Absolutely. That's exactly why, there is some transition time needed. So we want to make sure that number is correct, but that's all part of that process. So thanks for bringing that to the forefront again.
Very good. And who was next? Getting old, I can't remember. Maybe I have to write it down from now on.
It was Miss Halley.
Miss Halley, and then Senator Bates, and then Small.
Thank you. I just would like to better understand some of the mechanics of, we talked about there being a test blueprint. We've talked in the past about having a bank of test items. How does it work for end of course assessments in terms of the construction of the test?
Jennifer, I think that goes to you.
Right. So I talked about the blueprint remaining in place. And the reason for that is that not only are these end of course assessments, they are also accountability tests, and we're required by federal law to measure, again, the breadth and the depth of our standards. So in terms of the test and what it's going to look like, it's going to look the same as what the test was originally designed to be for those reasons. We don't want to remove things because then we wouldn't really be measuring the standards in the way that we believe instruction should be given in those standards, and we need to measure it that way. So the blueprint will remain.
I guess I'm trying to be a little more concrete here. So in the past, when we've talked about tests, we've had a bank of test items so that you can't get a copy of the test and study the answers. So how does that work on these end of course assessments, that there's security, I guess, in that regard?
Right. So none of that changes. We still have our bank of items, and we still administer in a secure environment. So they would just take it while they were in their actual classroom, or however the school sets it up, but it remains the same. So all of the items are secure. None of that changes. It just is the way that we hand over the score, and then that rolls into their grade. The way the assessment is administered and designed and put together and developed is all the same.
So we already have a valid bank of test items that we're going to continue to use.
This will be the MCAP assessment that we've been designing and working on administering for the last year. So yes, we're building it as we know. This was a new test, so yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bates?
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't want people saying that we are in any way reducing our standards. So as I understand it, the standards are all the same. It's just the timing of when the assessments take place. Is that correct?
Well, Senator, we're also decoupling it from that high stakes graduation.
No, I understand that, yeah. but we are not in any way reducing our standards. That's what I want to make sure, that if somebody says to me, why are you doing it? Are you lessening the standards? No. We're not doing that at all. It's really just timing of the assessment. We're still assessing, and we're taking it away from the graduation requirement.
Right. We're still making sure, it's good to bring this up though, we're still making sure that we are measuring whether or not students have mastered those standards that are associated with those courses.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And we are still accountable for them, and we will still be doing an accountability report.
Okay, very good. Ms. Morrow.
Thank you for this presentation today. I do support the idea of this transition to the end of course assessment. I guess speaking a little bit to what Rose brought up, one of my concerns in the implementation has been how long it usually takes to get scores for our spring testing. And as we transition to this, I think it's important that we have that time to figure out how to do that correctly, how to do that in a timely manner that allows districts to still put that on report cards in a normal summer time frame, because that also impacts, what opportunities kids have for summer credit recovery, how the schools do scheduling for the next school year. And while these are called high school assessments, we recognize that, there's also a lot of middle schoolers taking algebra who will have this same assessment, correct?
Right. Yes.
So it's not just, one group of high schoolers for graduation. It's a spectrum of students taking these courses from, 7th grade to 12th grade potentially. One concern I have, so we're calling 21-22, or we're calling 2021 one of the transitional years. How do we vote on this today, knowing that we have not resolved what we're doing with spring testing? In December, you guys brought up some issues about remote administration for standardized testing. And this is something that the superintendent spoke to in public comment today. We haven't addressed that. So if we pass this saying that this is a transitional year without yet resolving what we're doing for spring administration, aren't we putting ourselves in a potential position where we're going to have to go back and change this anyhow?
No, and let me explain why. Your meeting in February will be focused on assessment and our plans for administering the assessments this spring. So my hope is that we're going to have many of our students back in school, and we're going to be administering assessments because we need to get feedback on our items. It's a perfect way to do it this year. And so we'll have a presentation for you in terms of how we are going to be doing that in February. And we'll also know more about school openings by that time, I hope, as well.
Okay, thank you.
At this time now, the floor is open for a motion, and it's the state superintendent is requesting approval to delink high school assessment as an exit graduation requirement and move to including the end of course assessments to account for 20% of the student's final grade for the respective courses in algebra, English, science, and government. Do we have a motion? Senator Bates, I saw you first.
Right, move approval.
Second would be Mr. DeShields. Questions? Dr. Lee?
May I ask for a modification to have the department look at accelerating the timetable for the transition? So I don't know how to do that. Do I?
I will second the friendly amendment. How's that?
But if it is a friendly amendment, we go back to the person who made the motion.
I'm okay.
They accept it. Do you accept it, Senator Bates?
Yes.
Okay. So now that is included, so we'll try to look at accelerating that. That would be part of what we're talking about here. So it is now incorporated. Are there, yes, Ms. Morrow.
Can you specify exactly how that would be worded in this motion that we approve? Is that changing the actual dates that we're approving today?
Does this need to be approved today, or can the department come back the next meeting?
This needs to be approved today for us to be able to move forward. And parents need to know, and teachers need to know. So this is a timely issue for us today.
Well, I suggest we just say the dates as configured are at the latest. And so it could be earlier than those dates. Use that kind of wording.
Dr. Getty?
And what about the percent of the grade? Do we need to give any leeway at this point in time, or does it come back to us later if we decide to change that 20%?
I think that can be changed. Again, the board can go back and look at the data that we provide. I see no problem with you changing the motion that I have recommended to as what Ms. Haley said. I think that makes sense and gets at what Dr. Lee was concerned about. And we also can take a look at the data that we collect on the 20% and decide if that is the right figure. So these are all things I think the thing that we want to try to accomplish today is to do the decoupling and then give us some time to figure out all of the ramifications around how to do that well and do it so that it still maintains the integrity of the assessments and the relationship to the courses, but also is the right thing for our children. So I think the modifications you are suggesting to my recommended or to my recommendation is certainly fine.
Exactly. Again, I want to just make sure for the record that we have it, that I think it was Ms. Hadley, you said that we would say that at the latest, a date at the latest or something?
Yes, if we look at the dates that have been proposed in the presentation, we could say that these dates would be these would be the latest dates of adoption.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we will take a roll call vote. We'll turn to Dr. Simpson. Can you help us with a roll call vote?
Mr. Bartley?
Aye.
Ms. Bates?
Aye.
Mr. DeShield?
Aye.
Dr. Getty?
Yes.
Dr. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Hadley?
Yes.
Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. McCusker?
Yes.
Dr. Miller McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Morrow?
Yes.
General Sumter?
Aye.
Dr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Mr. Wu?
Aye.
Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
The vote is complete.
Mr. Schoen?
The vote was unanimous, 14 in favor.
At this time,
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to the board. This is something that has been on our to-do list for quite a long time. And I think we're making the right decision for our children based on all the research that you heard Dr. Williamson and Dr. Judkins present. And I would just like to thank you on behalf of all the superintendents and myself for this vote today.
Excellent. Let us take, at this point, we were scheduled to take a 15-minute break. Let's take a 15-minute break so that we have also an opportunity to work on the magic and come back. So we'll be back at, let's say, around, let's say 11:25. That'll give us a little bit of time to work on the magic as well. 11:25. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. In Maryland, together. Morning. We are overcoming the challenges of COVID-19, reopening schools safely. and successfully.
Make sure the kids got their masks on and everything like that.
Here at Robert Moton Elementary in Carroll County, Principal Darrell Robbins, bus aide Marlon Summers, and school staff partner in safety.
Charlene, can you hear me okay?
From arrival to dismissal. Carroll County Public Schools.
Yes, we can hear you, Sarah.
Hybrid instruction.
As a principal,
Great, I just wanted to check.
We have to ensure everyone in the building is safe.
Schools across Maryland are demonstrating the same innovation and creativity as they open safely for students.
Good morning, pick up breakfast.
Schools adapt,
White milk, chocolate milk.
maintain social distance,
There you go.
and they provide constant communication and reminders. Breakfast in class, desks spread out, hallways clearly marked and spaced so students keep that critical distance.
Charlene or Mia, are you there?
Getting the tape measure out.
Hi, John. Are you here?
Yes, I am seeing the video play in a small square screen, but it's got a some sort of a YouTube block covering the video.
Okay, I think it's because I need to share the window here.
The gym.
So let me do this very quickly, and I don't see the video anymore on my end, so that's why I
The State
haven't
Department of Education and Maryland's Department of Health have set guidance.
Hey there. I'm calling in via phone. Can you hear me?
Hi, Laura. Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thanks for jumping on. I was just about to send you an email to say let's test it in the actual window.
Okay.
So I was trying. I'm trying to pull it up, and it is running on my end. But what I can't see. So
can we set up another test? I think Dr. Salmon would prefer it not be, shown until she has the opportunity to show it.
Well,
I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Hello?
Laura, I can hear you. This is Charlene.
Okay.
I can hear you too, Sylvia.
I think we're going to go out of here. We're going out of this one. I'll set up another WebEx so we can test.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Good morning, everybody. In Maryland, together. We are overcoming the challenges of COVID-19, reopening schools safely and successfully.
Make sure the kids got their masks on and everything like that.
Here at Robert Moton Elementary in Carroll County, Principal Darrell Robbins, bus aide Marlon Summers, and school staff partner in safety practices throughout the day, from arrival to dismissal. Carroll County Public Schools are open for in-person hybrid instruction.
As a principal, that's our first job. You know, we have to ensure everyone in the building is safe.
Schools across Maryland are demonstrating the same innovation and creativity as they open safely for students.
Good morning, pick up breakfast.
Schools adapt,
White milk, chocolate milk.
maintain social
White milk,
distance,
chocolate milk. There you go.
and they provide constant communication and reminders. Breakfast in class, desks spread out, hallways clearly marked and spaced so students keep that critical distance.
It really is about getting the tape measure out.
As he enters the cafeteria, the principal points out the lunchroom.
language recommended by PISTAB also inadvertently eliminates